Back when I was in Colombia, I got a girl pregnant. You guys probably have a lot of questions like, what happened to the child? How could I be so irresponsible? How did I know if it's even mine? Well, in order to answer all those questions, we have to go back to the beginning. So I first arrived to Colombia in January of 2020, and a little bit after I moved in, the pandemic started. I lived in a shared apartment that took up this whole entire floor of a house. I was able to develop a really good relationships with my flatmates, particularly the Venezuelan couple. I developed a really good relationship with the guy, and he actually helped me when I was scammed by a lawyer. We had to call the police and everything, but that's a story for a different day. The woman had a best friend that she grew up with. Let's just call her Andrea. And when the country collapsed, all of them migrated over to Colombia together. Venezuelans were often treated as second-class citizens. They were not being paid enough because a lot of them didn't have legal papers. They were seen as criminals. It's very interesting because many countries have this dynamic when they accept a bunch of refugees. Even here in Poland, they see the Ukrainians in the exact same way. And that's exactly what happened to this Venezuelan couple. They were very young. I think they arrived when they were 18, and they were looking for work, but nobody would give them any jobs. A lot of people wouldn't pay them correctly just because they weren't documented or they weren't a Colombian citizens, and they found themselves in webcam work. And I remember asking them a bunch of questions about why did they do it or how it was like. There was literally no other options. And Andrea, because she followed in their footsteps, ultimately ended up doing the same thing. I first came across her indirectly through Instagram because I knew her through my Venezuelan friends. And I didn't know that she was doing this webcam thing or anything, but at the time I just came from America. I thought, hey, it's 2020. I'm a modern man. This is something that I can definitely handle. Newsflash, is definitely something I cannot handle, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And after we got to know each other for a little bit, she told me her whole entire story, and I ended up meeting her parents. I think I had a conversation with her mom at the time. It really made me appreciate all the sacrifices my parents made for my sister and I, because we didn't have to really grow up that way. When she was telling me about her work, a lot of the times she didn't even really have to be naked. A lot of these guys just paid her so they can talk to her. So she was essentially like their therapist. It really changed my perspective on people who did this kind of work. I think there's a stigma in a lot of Western countries about people who are in OnlyFans or all of these things. It's different when you're coming from a richer country and you choose to do this. But a lot of people in these poor countries, they literally have no other options for work, so this is the only thing that they can do. And that's why I no longer judge people who do OnlyFans. You really don't know the story behind that. A lot of girls who do this kind of work see the worst of men and the worst of humanity, so it kind of turns them off from men in general. So we kept seeing each other, and even though there wasn't this crazy spark or anything, we really enjoyed each other's company. Especially during the pandemic, it was very, very hard being so alone. And everything was good until one night that changed everything. We only really had sex one night, but we did it 3 times. The first time we did it with a condom, and I finished inside of the condom. The second time we did it without a condom, just briefly, maybe for like a minute or 2. But I knew deep down in my heart that something was wrong, so we stopped. I went to the bathroom, I cleaned up, and then I eventually put a condom on, and we did it again for the 3rd time. Also keep in mind that I didn't even finish inside of her. She got pregnant through pre-cum. So you never think that it's going to happen to you, but yes, this stuff actually happens. It's crazy. Even the day after, she took the day after pill, and I was with her and I bought it for her. We were pretty certain that there was no way that she could have gotten pregnant. A couple weeks later, out of the blue, I received a text message from her. Sure enough, it was my worst fear. She told me that she was pregnant. Oh man, I remember how I felt during that moment. It was like a mix of regrets, but also fear. I had so many thoughts racing through my head at that time, but the biggest one was very simple. I don't think I'm ready to be a father. The fear of that responsibility hit me harder than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And in that fear, I suddenly understood my father in a way that I never did before. I had a pretty rocky relationship with my dad. Up to that point, I harbored a lot of anger and resentment towards him and how he treated me as a child. But at that moment, I realized that, wow, my dad had a child around my age now, and he probably felt the same way that I did now. And I think this is one of the best things to come from this experience, that I finally understood my dad on a new level, and it deepened my relationship with him a lot. And I think this is a part of growing up. When we're younger, we often demonize our parents because of the traumas that they inflict on us. But as you get older and you experience life for yourself and you're put in these morally gray situations, you understand that our parents are just like anybody else. And all that fear that I was feeling at that moment about being a father, my dad probably felt that at one point as well. So during this time, I actually made a couple of videos documenting the journey. If you guys are curious about that, you can sign up to my Patreon, where I have like a lot of the unfiltered videos of my life story, and I actually have the video of when I was going through the whole entire abortion at that time. So after she gave me the news, Andrea and I, we sat down and discussed what we wanted to do. I made it clear that I wasn't going to pressure her. If she wanted to have the child, I would have supported it. But if she wanted to have an abortion, I also would have supported that. She felt that she was too young to have a child. I think she was only 24 at the time. She was very scared through the whole entire process. So she ultimately made the decision to have an abortion. So of course, after going through all of this, I had to tell my parents, and that was probably the most nerve-wracking conversation I ever had in my life. Coming from an Asian family, doing something like this is very dishonorable. They were shocked, of course, but they didn't disown me or anything. They gave me a lot of supportive words and said that whatever you decide to do, we will support you. That was one of the most beautiful moments I think that I had with my family because, you know, in my time of need, they were all there for me in that way. On the day of the abortion, we were both incredibly nervous. I remember accompanying her to the clinic, a very tricky issue in Colombia because abortion technically isn't legal. If it's early enough, there are a couple of pills that she can take to help terminate the pregnancy. Kind of this weird moral gray area that they have there. It felt so small at the time and I really didn't process what happened immediately. After some time, I started realizing the gravity of what we have done. And I'm gonna be honest, it really felt like we killed our kid. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that, oh, it was really, really hard for me because I'm sure it was definitely a lot harder for her. But even as the man, I felt very guilty and distraught about it. And it also shook up a lot of my beliefs. And even though I can understand the moral argument against abortion, ultimately, I think it is better for society. I would be a hypocrite if I were to have done it myself and tell other people that they can't do it. A lot of people who are against abortion, especially in Colombia, were people that have had abortions in the past and they regret all of it, so they don't want other people to do it, which I think is kind of messed up. There's this thing called the ghost baby syndrome, in which people who have gone through an abortion, especially women, still feel and act like the child was there. The way that we mourned the loss of the child afterwards definitely felt like it was a born baby. It's very, very difficult to explain. And I've had friends who have gone through a similar experience and they share a similar feeling. It's like this guilt, like you failed as a man, as a father, for not being able to take care and provide for your kid. But I also imagine that it must be worse for the woman because they're the ones that have to go through the whole entire physical experience of everything, right? And how I know that she was a good woman was that through this whole entire time, she never once asked me for money. She never tried to trick me. She never tried to scam me. She was panicking just as much as I was. I still ended up giving her money for like rent for a month because she could not obviously work after what she'd been through and she went through so much emotional turmoil. But that's why I'm not gonna sit here and slander her character because she honestly is a very good person. And even to this day, her and I surprisingly were still on really, really good terms. And it gave me a lot more sympathy for the women's point of view in a situation like this. When I think about this experience, it definitely was one of the more darker points of my life. But I feel like it also taught me a lot of just about who I am, about how difficult and gray life can be sometimes. It made me change my opinions on a lot of things, particularly with dating and the women that I choose to let into my life. It taught me the real risks and dangers of having casual and unprotected sex with strangers. I didn't think that something like this could happen to me, and I was pretty irresponsible about my sexual decisions in the past. And thankfully, you know, I never had any diseases or had any other pregnancies, but this event really woke me up. A lot of guys like to talk about, you know, oh, I had sex with this girl, I had sex with that girl, and a lot of guys will just be out here irresponsibly doing things without a condom because they never think anything bad can happen to them. But I'm proof that you never know exactly what's gonna happen. I never thought it was gonna happen to me, but it did. But the purpose of sex, on top of pleasure, is to create new life. And that is always possible with almost every single person that you have sex with, right? Because I saw the real consequences of what happens if you can get a girl pregnant that you're not even really married to, or, you know, really feel that deeply about emotionally. Also, a part of me feels like this is a lesson that God genuinely wanted me to learn. I wouldn't say I'm a religious person anymore because of my bad experiences with the church. I still have a strong connection with God because I've had several religious experiences in my life, and crazy experiences such as this one, I have interpreted as a way of God trying to teach me a very valuable lesson. It showed me that things are not always black and white. I think a lot of people like to prejudge other people's circumstances without having gone through it themselves. That's why it kind of bugs me when people talk about abortion so lightly, because I'm like, once you go through it yourself, it's one of the most emotionally painful and sad things that you'll ever get to experience. But I'm kind of happy that I did because I became a stronger person out of it. Andrea and I, we still talk to this day. I think the last time I saw her, she was a waitress, and I think she's doing something else now. So I only wish the best for her. If something like this has happened to you, please share your story down below because I know there's a lot of people that have gone through this. I recommend you guys watch this video next, and I'll see you on the next one.